Welcome, everybody. I'm Mark Miller, and with me is Rory Becker in the UK. Rory, how are you doing?
Not too bad, Mark. Not too bad.
Great, great. And today we're going to talk to you, Rory and I will talk to you about events in CodeRush. I expect this one is going to be shorter than some of the earlier ones. I'm going to go for 30 minutes or less on this particular webinar.
Okay, cool.
And with that, we'll dive right in and get started. So there are some, I'm going to start with templates, I think, Rory, and we'll talk about this templates for a bit.
Sure.
One of the templates that we have for creating a new event is EV, and just the space bar like that will create the new event. If I just hit enter on this field right here, it'll accept event handler, and then I can give it a name, whatever that name will be, like countdown finished, something along those lines would be my event. And so I've created that with the EV template. Let me put a note there for it. That's how I got here. Another template that we can do is EVAR. And what EVAR will do is it'll do an event, but it will also give you the add and the remove accessors inside of that. And it's bigger and looks like this. And over here's the window that says, hey, what happened? The template just expanded. Do you want that to always happen? And I can say, yes, okay. So EVAR on an empty line inside of a class will give you this. I can then specify the name of the event handler, what that's going to be. Maybe I'll change it. Maybe I'll change it to a countdown event. Or maybe countdown handler, something along those lines. And that'll be the type of it. We'll declare that in a little bit. I hit enter. Now over here we can say something like countdown started, for example. And then now we have to declare countdown handler. So to do that, I'm going to copy this to the clipboard, and I'm going to use another template called D for creating delegates, and then I can just paste that in like that, and then I can specify the arguments for it. Now with events, it's convention to pass object sender as the first parameter to the event, but it's by no means a requirement. And so as a result, what we do is we highlight this object sender and the comma in a field. So if you don't want it, it's just as simple as hitting delete once there, and we'll delete again to get to the space, and then now you're over here on event args, and then you can specify what your event args would be for that.
Sure.
So D for declaring delegates, and it works here, and it works here as well. So inside a class and outside a class. Okay, you can use that D to create delegates very quickly. Okay, let's see. So we declared countdown finished. We use EVAR. Let's look at this a little bit more closely and see what is interesting to us about this here. For example, here we've got this to-do piece that says, if needed, add code to respond to the first event hookup. So sometimes you might do something like an event might have an expensive side effect associated with it, or in other words, if I have no events, no listeners at all, I don't want to maybe do something that's expensive. But if I have, as soon as I have the first listener right here, I maybe want to do something expensive or set a state to indicate we have listeners.
Sure.
Okay, right, like that. And then likewise down here, if countdown started is null, we might want to clear that state so that we have no more listeners. Okay, and this is one reason why you might want to use the EVAR template to create these add and remove accessors. Okay, sure. Or you might want to have custom triggering of the event. For example, we've got this countdown started piece right here, and we might want to trigger things or handle the triggering of that in a way where we, for example, maybe protect each event handler with a try-catch block. And then if, for example, a handler causes a problem, we might want to then log that, for example. So that's another reason why you might want to use this .NET feature here. So CodeRush helps you get there a little closer with the EVAR template. Okay, if you don't have any side effect code here, by the way, so we'll take out that side effect code. CodeRush has two refactorings it gives you. One is collapse accessors, and the other is expand accessors, and it's available right there on the add and remove keywords. So I can very quickly collapse those if I want to, or expand those. And that only works if there's no side effect code. It's just simply an assignment right there. Okay. All right, let me just look at my notes here. Oh, a few others. Let's go into my form. So Windows form over here, and I have a button. Let's double click on the button. And sometimes, and let's put back on the form, and let's maybe double click the form. Sometimes I like to group my event handlers together in the code. And so there's a template called /EH, which will just give me a quick comment there, code area comment, that says here's what's coming up next. And so there's actually a number of these code area comments inside of that we ship with CodeRush. So I'll show you what those are. You might find those useful for specifying the areas of your code. So EH is one that I use a lot. PM is one I use a lot for public methods, things like that. If I want private methods, and you can look through this list right in here. So PVM is for private methods. And it's just a single slash followed by an abbreviation for what you want, and then you'll see a comment out there for the code areas. If you find that useful, you can do that. So I've got event handlers, and there's another one related to events called ET for event triggers, and that's for if you're going to create your own event triggers, and we'll use this a little later, and that's where you can mark those areas of code. Now you saw me double click on the form. On the button, I can go ahead and add code here, whatever that's going to be. But I double clicked on the form and I got this form load. So code will definitely go here. But this was unintentional. Like that.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Have you ever done that and I don't know if you have this problem in
Yeah.
VB or not. Do you have this in VB where you have
we do indeed, yeah.
Okay, so you've accidentally created an event handler and you don't want it. Well, how do you get rid of it? It's not as simple as deleting this because you've got a syntax error, at least in C# it's not. You'll get a syntax error over in the form because this form1 load is, if I use tab to next reference here, hit the tab key, is referenced here. So if I simply delete it over in this location, I'm going to have a problem. So what I can do instead is I can just put the caret inside it, and I can hit the CodeRush refactor key, and I can choose remove empty handler. And that'll take it away here, and it'll also take it away over here on the designer. So there you can see it.
So CodeRush is detecting that your handler does absolutely nothing, and therefore is not necessary, and it's also working out where it's being removed as the initialized component.
Yes, and as I recall, it's intelligent about this. It doesn't just work in forms; it works other places too. That's as I recall. So so you can verify that, and if you find behavior that does not meet your expectations, let us know, and we'll certainly change that. So so yes, it does do that, and I find that this is really, really handy because no longer, it's especially handy when I've made a couple changes that I want to keep, and then I discover the empty event handler, right? Yeah. I realize, oh, I didn't need to do this. Now I can no longer undo.
That's right. Yeah.
So I find it incredibly useful in those cases because I see the problem and I just say, okay, let's fix it. As opposed to the old days when I was like, oh God, I've got to go find its reference in the form and where is it? Manually delete that line, come back, delete this. And it totally derails my focus and concentration, that kind of an interruption. So I love being able to just remove it very, very quickly when it's not there. All right, so the next part I'm going to show you, here we'll go over into program.cs, I think, and we'll, actually, let's create a new class. We'll do something different instead. I'll create a new class, and I will call this class airplane, and we'll move this to its own file. And inside Airplane, I'm going to create a new event, so I'll use the EV template, and we're going to call this event I want to say like transition, air transition, or maybe this, I don't know if I want to say takeoff landing. I guess I'll just say landing for now. We'll say landing event handler, okay? And and we'll call this landing, all right? So I'm calling this landing event handler. I'm going to put the caret here, hit the CodeRush refactor key, and I'm going to choose declare delegate. So it's going to just declare it for me, right? It sees that it's an event, and so it's going to start it with object sender, and it's going to pass in event args to it. But we don't have to stop here. We can change this. Now, staying with conventions, I can specify any parameter here I want, right? Any list of parameters. They don't have to be event arg descendants, etc. I can do that. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here and I'm going to say, for event args, I'm going to say, call these the landing event args. So we'll have something very specialized. And so if you're watching this and you say, hey, wait, this is a little bit familiar, we did something similar when we were talking about in the declare first webinar, in the consume first declaration webinar. That was the one we did this in. So at any rate, I'm going to hit the CodeRush refactor key, and I'm going to choose declare event args descendant, right? And now that I'm here, I'm going to specify parameters that I want to then become, that will later become properties of these event args. So for example, on a landing of a plane, what happens? Well, we have a time that we land. So I'm going to type in V for variable. In fact, let me bring up the DevExpress training window. So tool windows, CodeRush. And this will give you this training window here. Let's move this over into that area. Okay. And now when I'm here in between parens, you can see that I can use V for variables. So I'll type in, let's say I want to have a date time. So I'm going to type in V for a variable, then D for date time, and I'm going to look down over the list over here, and I'm going to see that date time is there, and I need the 8 to follow it. So it's essentially a mnemonic that is D8 is pronounced date in the United States, in English at least, right? So that's how I get the date time. Yep. So it's a similar one. So anybody who doesn't speak English as their first language, that's maybe an explanation for why D8 is mapped to date time. You have total control over these. You can change these mnemonics if you want to. DT, by the way, if you're wondering why we didn't use DT, is because it's hooked up to data table, and we felt that that made more sense for data table when we could do date time with D8. So we'll do D8 like that for a variable that we'll pass in, and we'll call this the landing time, like that, and we might do another parameter we might pass in. I'll use V again, and now S for string, which will be the location that we land, or maybe the airport, the name of the airport name, for example. Okay? So now that I've got these here, I'm now going to hit the CodeRush refactor key, and I'm going to choose declare initialize property. It's going to give me that right there, and it's initialized it. Hit escape, come back over here, and do it again, declare initialize property. And so now we have our event args finished with a landing time and an airport name. Okay? I'm going to take this, I'm going to move its type to its own file. So now it's in its own file, and if we look over here in the Solution Explorer, we can see this thing starting to fill out. Here we go, right here. So here's airplane, landing event args. That's what we've built so far. Okay? Nice. Whenever I do a refactoring, I say this every time, but whenever I do a refactoring or code provider, it takes me away from where I start. I hit escape to get back. And now I'm back, and escape to get back again. There I'm in the landing event args. That's where I started. And now escape one more time, and I'm down here on my landing event handler. So I started this whole thing with an EV template. Started all of this. Then CodeRush refactor key the rest of the way.
So the nice thing here is that whether it be templates or anything else, each of these things has driven you one level deeper into what you were trying to achieve and given you new contextual items which make sense in that context. So you start off with the event template, then you get to declare the delegate, and then from within the delegate declaration you can go and create landing event args class, which descends from event args. At every step it's just a couple of keystrokes adding variables into the methods of these, each one driving out your design, and then you hit escape a few times and each one takes you back along like a trail of breadcrumbs back to where you started.
Yes, yes, and it's very cool because one of the things that you get from this that I'm not sure if this is coming across or not, but I'm pressing very few keystrokes to get all of this code, right?
Sure.
There's not much I'm pressing to get all of this code. I'm spending more time typing in the names of things and writing these comments than I am, I'm burning more energy doing that than I am creating all these other pieces that I need. So now that we've got an event called landing, we can now trigger it. So we put the caret on it, we hit the CodeRush refactor key, and we're going to choose create event trigger. And there you can see the preview that it's going to give us for that. So it's going to give us a virtual on landing method. We can decide where we want to put that. And now that's where that /et template is going to work out well for us, to give us that event triggers piece so we can organize and have those all together. We're passing in our landing event args. Here we take the event landing and we assign it to a local variable called handler. And the reason we do that is for thread safety, so that if we instead of this, if we were to like come in here and we were to say, I was hoping to see inline, there we go, inline temp, there we go. So inline temp. If we were to instead write code like this, which is a way I used to write events, what could happen between this line of code and that line of code is somebody could say, hey, I don't want to listen to landing anymore, and landing goes null. Right? And so then what happens? We try to, or the listener removes itself from landing, and between here and here, and then we try to call it, and we have some trouble or something along those lines. Actually, I think that the removing is not the problem. It's the setting to null. So I take back what I said. I think that was total misinformation on the last thing I said. So yes, every once in a while that happens, right? I'm in the fuzzy area and I say, here's what I think is the case, and then I double check them in my head, and I was like, I'm not so sure anymore. So what we want to have instead is we want to have this handler. So we have an assignment. So this is thread safe. This is the proof date to trigger. So there's our on landing, and so that I think that's a pretty good completion round trip right there for that, where we start off from nothing, and then we get the event args. Oh, let me show you what, if you want to change your event args. Oh, let's actually create a call for this. Sorry, and we'll kind of take this even a step further here. So we create a new method. So mTemplate for a new method, call it land, and we'll pass in a variable type date time. So I typed in VD8. We'll say the time of landing. And enter, and I'll come over here and I'll type in VS, and we'll call the airport name, hit enter, and then enter one more time, gets me inside, and now I'll call on landing, and I'll pass in the sender, I'll say this, and the landing event args, I'll say new, landing event args, and what do we get in there? We have the time, pass, and then the airport name. Okay, so let's drill in. So there's our trigger. Let's drill into the new landing event args. Let's say we want to add a new parameter. Well, before we were using templates to add the parameters because we had no calls yet to it. So templates are really good if you're creating code from scratch. But now that we've got something that compiles, we've got a call to it, right? I can hit tab to next reference. I can go out in there and get to that call, right? So now that we've got that, we want to use something different. We want to use add parameter. So I'll use add parameter here, and we'll pass in a new parameter like, for example, the weight. So I'll type in V for variable, D for decimal, and then I'll need another E there to get the decimal. So VD like that, pass that in, and we'll call this weight. And here, let me hit undo a second on this. The add parameter, I just realized the V. This looks so. Note to developers, the developers of CodeRush who are watching this, right here on object. When I use the V template, I'm expecting this to actually work, and oops, I can enter the VD8 space, and instead of creating this piece to actually go and highlight name, I expect VD8 to work, the variable templates to work with that parameter. But since it didn't, it's okay. We still have the other templates, which are T for type references, so I'll do that instead. T for type reference, and then still D8 again, because I want a type reference to date time. Hit enter. Over here, it's going to give us a default name. We'll change it to just simply oh, wait, did I want time? I'm sorry.
You're going to go with some weight, I thought you said.
Yeah, all of that. Holy cow. Let's do one more time. So now I'm going to do, I type in TDE for decimal. Okay, and there you can see on the left here, that's what's going to give me a type reference to decimal. Hit enter, and now we're going to pass in weight. Holy cow.
There we go.
Now I hit enter, add parameter now wants to take me over here to the constructors, all the constructors, and is asking, what do I want to pass in? Well, I'm going to pass in something different that doesn't exist yet, called weight. Then I'm going to hit enter, okay, and that gets rid of that green bar, and then if there are any other instances of this constructor, it would take me to those as well, but they don't exist. So now we'll go back. You know what, in fact, let's undo this. Let's show that, because I think that's useful. We'll create something new called crash landing. Okay, so now we have two calls to the event args, right? And now let's go back inside here, And let's go back and we'll do that same thing one more time. Add parameter. It remembers the last type I selected, so now decimal is here, and it's suggesting that. I'll go ahead and take it.
That's a nice touch. Yeah.
I'll type in weight, hit enter. Now we're back over here again. This time, watch what happens when I type in what I want it to be.
You've got some nav stuff down the bottom right there as well, which allows you to
Right.
move between them.
Yes, exactly. I can actually hit tab to actually see them all in advance. Now here's what's happening. The way this is actually totally off topic, but useful to talk about with add parameter. When add parameter is applied, after we go through that first interactive phase and we hit enter on it, right? We then enter a second interactive phase. And this allows us to specify the value that's passed in everywhere. Now what happens is, if you imagine this, is we're giving you a list of all the references, okay? We're essentially approaching these, you're seeing them in order from all the calls that we found. And so when we open up a file, you're going to see the top one in the file, the next one, etc. So as I start to type what I want to pass in here, like that weight field, right? So underscore WEIGHT, and I hit enter on that. Oh, come on! Why didn't that work? Devs, why didn't that work? Seriously. Okay.
Is it because you nabbed away slightly the first time because I spotted the?
Let's see if that's the case. If because I did the tab, that may be it.
Yeah.
Okay. So
you broke
developers
the link between them at that time.
I don't know if that was the case. I tabbed away and I came back, so maybe that was the case. So at any rate, what happens is this is the way it normally works, right? I was maybe exploring and tabbing away. Can you note the time on this, Rory? And then just a little note that the tab, take a look at the tab behavior and see what's happening with there. It seems to be breaking or interfering with the expected behavior. All right, so I've typed in weight. Notice down below, it's also got weight. We can see part of it right there. Okay. In fact, I can close this down now if I don't want to see this anymore. I'll just do this so we can still show this in the future. So whatever I type here, oops, I hovered over that. Whatever I type here is going to be typed in all the other locations, everywhere else.
And that's in the other files that you might have as well, if you happen to have references there.
Right. So if I have something like, that's useful if I have something like, my class dot, max weight or something. In other words, I'm referencing a property that exists outside that everybody can see. But if not, it's not a big deal. I just hit enter here, and now it takes me to the next one, and I can hit enter, or I can hit, I think control enter was one of the options to accept them all. Or I can just move out of them and work somewhere else. Right, go somewhere else and work. So what's cool about this now is that now that I've done that, I'm at the last one. I've hit enter, and I'm at the very last one. I can now come in here and I can say declare field. There it is right there. I can use tab to mix reference, come up here. I can say encapsulate field read only, like that, for example. And now, oh, look, it's asking if I want to change these other fields. Yeah, sure, I can go ahead and pass in those now. So we're now passing in the property instead. So you can see what's going on here with this. And the last thing I need is like a constructor, so I can type in CC, use this constructor template. I'm totally going off topic here. We'll go ahead and assign.
This is all right, though, because it shows you how you flesh out a class from all manner of locations and how you can jump between the different pieces that you need to implement.
Right, and now
I'm learning just about events, but clearly there are other parts to class building. Right,
exactly, and it all is related to the landing event args. It all started here, right? I wanted to add a new parameter. Yeah. Now that I've added a new parameter, notice CodeRush is highlighting this in gray, indicating it's not used. That's my signal to hit the CodeRush refactor key. I'm going to choose declare initialized property. There it is. Weight is now assigned. I've got a property called weight. Hit escape to get back. Escape to get back. Okay, so what's cool is we're fleshing out a lot of code very quickly, not a lot of keystrokes. And
yeah, I mean, the concepts involved here are pretty simplistic. However, as you say, there's a lot of keystrokes, a lot of code, which would just be repetitious, boring, and subject to problems. I mean, you could get any of this wrong if you were doing it manually. If it's being done in an automated fashion, using context-sensitive triggers, it's that much more sure of being correct.
Yes, that's true. Yeah, if you were, and even if you are totally fine making mistakes and then catching up the compiler, it's still saving you time because those mistakes you're not seeing at the compiler. You're seeing other kinds of things. So okay, so let's go back to my list. What do I want to show you next? Okay, so so we've got this event on our airplane. Let's create a consumer of this. So we'll create a new class, and we'll call this. I guess we'll call this an airline. Is what we'll call this, an airline. And the airline will, let's say it'll create a new airplane. So let's come in here and say new airplane, whoops, not airline, airplane, and we will put it as a local, and we'll come in here, we'll say airplane dot landing plus equals, and we'll hit tab. And now at this point, you can hit tab to generate handler. I normally do that. I normally hit tab here to get here. Okay? So notice when I do that, it puts the caret right there in front of the throw new exception. So what am I going to do? I'm going to select it, and then I'm going to delete it, and I'm going to start writing my code. Okay?
Yep.
But let's get rid of this for a second. Let's come up here. Let's hit the CodeRush refactor key, and now we have declare event handler. Now we get to pick where we want to put it, so we get one additional step, but we get a benefit from that, right? We get to choose where we want that handler, and then the second benefit we get is the throw new not implemented exception is selected for us. So we can simply just start typing whatever we want to, or delete it and then start typing. Okay.
I should also point out that the built-in Visual Studio functionality isn't there in all languages in all versions of Studio, and this sort of stuff is supported since I think Visual Studio 2005 when you use CodeRush in conjunction with it.
Right, and I would even say maybe even earlier, but I don't think there's a single soul who's still using 2003. But,
I really hope there isn't.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I'm almost sure there is, but yeah.
So CodeRush is highlighting this with a squiggly line right here, and if we hover the mouse over this, you see it's there's an issue that we have redundant delegate creation. And we can remove it simply by clicking this button right here, and it will get rid of that and just say plus equals airplane landing. That issue is, like Rory says, there have been advances with regards to events and simplifying things, over time, and so it checks to see what version of the framework you're using or the version of the language that you're using, depending on when the feature was introduced, and then offers the issue if it makes sense, and offers the fix as well if it makes sense. Okay, so there's that pieces of those pieces of it. Let me go to over to what's the other one I want to go to? I thought there was I'm just going to do this. Oh no, here it is right here. Timer test. So here I have a method called timer test, initialize thread timer returns a timer. So I'm going to use a template called RI, which gives me a return instance called result. And I'm going to say this is equal to new timer, and it has some parameters. One of them is a callback. I'll say my callback, or maybe timer tick would be better. That's my method name. Then I'm going to pass in the other parameters here: initial state, due time, and period. Oops. Okay. So I've just essentially satisfied the constraints, but timer tick is not declared yet. It's a callback. I can press the CodeRush refactor key and choose declare event handler, and look at how easy this is. And it builds it for me. I don't have to go look and see what is it expecting and declare it myself. Holy cow! Because what do you do? Have to do normally. What you do is this: is you get to here because Visual Studio won't help me here. Visual Studio does not have anything to declare this. So what do? I come in, I check the type. It's a timer callback. Then I come up here and I type in timer callback, right? And then I generally jump to the declaration to see what it is. Oh, okay, it's a void. It returns a void, and it takes an object. I copy this to clipboard, right? And then I come back, and then I declare it. By this time, I've wasted like 30 seconds at least, just like doing something that has nothing to do with building my application, right?
It's even worse in VB. We don't get the when we go to the definition of something that's in the framework, we don't get the pseudo source code version that you saw just there. So what we have to do is to go and build a version of the handler with the wrong signature and wait for the error to come up and tell us it's wrong.
Yeah, I've used that technique before in C#, I think, before I figured out that I could drill into the class and get it the other way. Yeah, it's a huge pain, and in my opinion, it's a barrier to consuming code that deals with callbacks, and callbacks are actually very cool, right? We can create our own callback as well, right? We can create a method, that comes in here and takes like a super callback like this, which I haven't declared yet. I'm going to hit Control-A just to get a variable of the same name right there, right? And then inside here, it's going to do something. Let's go in here. Let's copy the clipboard. You just use the D template to create a new delegate. Paste that in. This is our super callback. This is going to take in maybe just a string. which is like a message, for example. And maybe let's have it even return an int, for example. We could do something along those lines. Now that we have that, we can come in here and say super callback, and then pass in, let's do this, just to emphasize, CodeRush rocks. Seriously. Okay, so I'm going to put a semicolon here, and let's use declare local to get my result back, whatever that's going to be. Let's come back over here, hit the R template. Let's pass result back. Hit the CodeRush refactor key. Convert to function. Now I've got a method that does some stuff, and maybe it'll square it. Result times result, for example. So get square. We'll call this get square of my super callback. Get square. Okay. And so now I come in down in here. I know, Roy, it's kind of fun. And so now, for here, instead of passing in period time span, we'll pass in a new time span. Well, let's do this. New time span, or wait, I want time span dot from days, and I'm going to pass in a call to get square, and I'm going to pass in my callback. I can't come up with a better name. Okay, and now hit the CodeRush refactor key, choose declare event handler. Boom! Right? So now it's so much faster and easier, right? I use the D template here, the D template right there. I use the CodeRush refactor key everywhere else, right? And now I have a method that I can essentially pass another method into that it calls. Right, but it doesn't have to be just my callback. It could be something else as well, right? If to do write the code here. Well, I'll just say R0 for now. It's going to return the 0 and maybe log a message or something like that, right? But let's say I want to pass in a different thing. I can say my other callback. Hit the CodeRush refactor key, declare event handler, right? It's just as fast and easy. So what I'm doing is now I'm passing in methods to essentially implement logic, and it's very fast and easy to do this, right? It's in my opinion, doing it without CodeRush, just in Visual Studio alone, it's like it presents such a barrier to consumption. It makes it really hard to create well-designed code that is incredibly decoupled, right? Because that's what I'm doing. I'm taking parts of my logic and I'm encapsulating it, but then I'm passing it into something that has a bigger bit of logic, right?
It's very similar to generics in that you can get these very complex hierarchies of list, of dictionary, of another list, of whatever, and to declare the method you're going to use, in this case the callback you're going to use, based on what's being passed in, and just have CodeRush figure out the specifics based on your example. It's a very powerful tool.
It is. It is. And with that, I'm going to, unless you've got anything else, Rory, you want to talk about events, I'm going to say we are done.